Welcome to Behind the Badge with your special guest, Lieutenant Williams, your news source for all things police in the city of Fond du Lac.
Welcome back into News Talk 1450 and 100.7 KFIZ. It's now time for another edition of Behind the Badge. Joining us this morning is no Lieutenant Williams, as he's still away. I guess he's in meetings. The vacation is now over. But we got Officer Clapper in studio, so we're ready to have some fun on our Friday morning.
Happy to be back. I will be gone. Well, actually, I'll be back for the next segment. So, just having a little vacation myself. So, Lieutenant Williams is in a meeting today. So, he had to do some catch up when he got back from vacation. He's a busy man. So, I decided to come in and do the radio show myself.
Awesome, appreciate it. Always has time for us, does Officer Clapper. As we look ahead and we transition to what we want to talk about this morning, I know there's a couple different things we're going to hit on because we don't know if we can fill 10 minutes on one of the topics, so we're going to talk about a couple. Let's talk about the process of being an officer, and there's obviously the circumstances where you pull someone over and you can immediately need to do the work that you do. But let's say you need to get a search warrant involved, whether it be to search the vehicle fully or maybe someone's property. Let's kind of hit on the process for that.
Right. So there's couple things I want to talk about regarding search warrants. So regarding a vehicle, depending upon the circumstances, if we stop a vehicle and we have probable cause to search that vehicle, there's an exception to getting a search warrant, which is called the Carroll Doctrine, which essentially means if it's movable, that including like boats, RVs, stuff like that, if it's on the roadway and able to be moved easily, that we can search it if we have probable cause. Because if we have to go apply for a search warrant, take some time, and the vehicle could be moved. So let's just say we stop a vehicle and there's an odor of drugs or like marijuana or something that's contraband or illegal in plain view, we can search that vehicle without getting a search warrant. But speaking about residences, or even now that we're getting so technologically advanced, like we could apply for a search warrant for someone's Snapchat account if it's correlated it to a crime, or Facebook accounts, any social media, their telephone, even things like their Amazon Alexa or their camera footage if it's involved in a crime and the person doesn't consent to. So there's always exceptions to us getting a search warrant. So you'll see videos on the internet of officers, maybe they are kicking in a door on someone's residence. There are exceptions. So there's ways we can search, which is obviously with a search warrant, right? And then number two, there is with consent. So if Braden, you say, hey, yeah, it's fine, come search my house, then we can come search your house. But there's also other exceptions, like the emergency doctrine, like Braden's having a medical emergency in his house and we need to get in there. It's not that we're searching, it's just entering to a area where you are expected to have privacy, right? So, and then there's community caretaker, another thing, like Braden hasn't been heard from in about a week. We're a little worried about him, so we force entry into your residence just to make sure you're okay, that kind of stuff. But a search warrant is kind of a lengthy process. The first one I will talk about is an OWI search warrant. So if we arrest somebody under suspicion of operating while intoxicated, whether that's drugs or alcohol, we will ultimately ask them, we'll read a form to them. It's called I forget the actual title of it, but it's the informing the accused form. That's what it is. So you read through it, ask if they consent to a blood draw, and if they don't, depending upon the offense and the totality of the circumstances, you could apply for a search warrant. So you'd have to go through what's called an affidavit in support of search warrant and fill that out. For that, you would call the on-call judge, and then from there, they would swear you in over the phone and you would testify under oath on a recorded line. Obviously, we have body cameras and dash cameras and stuff, so that's still recorded. But you testify under that oath, and then they'll grant you a search warrant, and then it'll be electronically submitted here soon. I think we may have even started that already, but that way that you can grant or get granted the search of that person's blood for further evidence supporting the crime. But secondly,
And that'd be something that's like almost immediately, right? You're not waiting much time for that other than, the phone calls, right?
right, the phone call and filling out the paperwork, it's pretty quick, but it has to be because you have to get their blood results within a couple hours of you stopping them because obviously people metabolize alcohol. So for an actual search warrant, so usually what happens is an officer will investigate a complaint. So a patrol officer will investigate a complaint. Some patrol officers are a little more advanced than others and will do a search warrant on their own. I've done a couple of them, but most of the time it's detectives. So we typically will have an officer investigate something. That report will get forwarded to the detectives, or if it's an officer that's going to handle it themselves, they will review it. They will speak to any further people that they need to, and then they'll also complete an affidavit of a search warrant, which essentially is a official document that has all the details and facts listed from what was learned in the investigation and what you're looking to search for. So that has to go up to the district attorney's office to be reviewed by the district attorney or assistant district attorney. And then ultimately it'll get presented to a judge who will review it and determine whether or not there's enough probable cause. And then from there, if they do find enough probable cause, they will sign it. You have a certain time frame to serve that search warrant. And then I think it's 5 calendar, like business days.
Okay.
And then it's 48 hours for the return of, basically you have to put on a sheet what you seized from the search warrant. Now we can only search for things that are on the search warrant, which I figured you were probably going to ask this, so I'll answer it proactively. But if we do stumble across something, let's just say I'm looking for a stolen handgun at a residence, okay? And I stumble across maybe some drugs that are illegal. So yes, we could still seize those drugs and still charge somebody with a crime, but from there, we would have to get the search warrant amended. So we would have to go back to the judge and say, hey, this is what we found. We want to add any illegal drugs to this. So if we're searching for something with a handgun, or searching an area for a handgun could be hidden in a lot of different places, right? Now, if we're searching for stolen TVs, we can't be checking people's like dresser drawers and stuff like that because
TV wouldn't fit in there, right?
Yeah. So that's just a kind of a little way that we're still searching for something, but if we come across something else illegal, we can add that and hopefully the judge approves of it, and then we can search that.
And so most of the times, right, if you come across something else that you weren't originally looking for, the judge would allow it, right? You would think, or is it a case by case?
I would say it's a case by case, but typically, because we're obviously there searching for evidence of crime and we have lawful authority to do so, and then we just happen to stumble across this other piece of evidence. So like, just an example, like sometimes we'll have one that I was on that I can recall, we had a heroin overdose death a few years ago, and there was a garage on the premise of the property along with a vehicle, and the garage was locked from the outside with a padlock. So the judge granted us a search, and we went into the garage and into the vehicle. I think there was some other stuff found that wasn't drugs, like maybe some stolen property, stuff like that. So ultimately we had probable cause and added that to that, and ultimately did continue to search for further stolen property. So
now in that circumstance, you had a search warrant to search the garage. Then does that search warrant also mean anything in the garage, like a vehicle then?
So it depends upon the circumstances, but how it's written in the affidavit for search warrant. So if it says any vehicles on the premise, then yes, but you have to articulate why you want to search that. So if we're searching for illegal drugs and you're just kind of going off a whim that there might be illegal drugs in any vehicle, that's kind of a stretch. You have to be able to articulate why you think there might be. So now if you're searching for, I don't know, maybe vehicles involved in a crime, like maybe a burglary or something, and you think that there might be evidence in some vehicles, that's something that you could articulate. But I would say no, not just because if there's a vehicle in the garage doesn't mean that you can search it, unless you listed that vehicle on your search warrant and it was granted by the judge.
Awesome, sounds good. Now, the time process to get the search warrant after you put in all the paperwork and you send it, how is that decided on the priority? Because obviously there can be numerous search warrants coming in. not just from you personally, but from all the other officers throughout the state and stuff, right?
Right. So in Fond du Lac County, what'll happen is we obviously have quite a few different law enforcement agencies. So we have Fond du Lac County Sheriff's Office, North Fond du Lac, Waupun, Ripon, the smaller agencies like Campbellsport, Rosendale, stuff like that. So there's a lot of different law enforcement agencies. So typically what'll happen is the judge, or there's multiple judges during the week, and we'll have to go back and have it reviewed by one of them. It's kind of it's unless it's a priority, like something just happened and we need a search warrant like now, like if it's significant, like maybe a homicide or something like that. Even at wee hours of the night, the detectives will go back to the PD. Officers will freeze the scene, on scene, and ultimately will detectives go back, they'll type out the search warrant, they call someone from the district attorney's office on call, ADA or DA, and then they review it, and then they take the judge out, or the warrant out to the judge's house, and then they'll have it reviewed. So if it's a little less of a priority, we typically go during the week when the judges are working, and then we just find an available judge. So it is a lengthy process. Sometimes it can take hours as well. So it just depending upon the circumstances of what kind of crime it is and what we're looking to search for.
Awesome. Appreciate the insights this morning on search warrants. Did we cover all of the search warrant stuff, or is there something that maybe we didn't hit on that you might know about?
I think that's about it. And then one other thing I wanted to touch base on was scams, and we see this a lot, particularly in Fond du Lac, but I also see other communities get it too, like Oshkosh and Winnebago County. So just a few things to keep in mind. If someone contacts you and it seems too good to be true, like they're going to give you $1 million if you buy them like $100 in eBay gift cards or something like that, it's probably too good to be true. So that's something that happens often, where it's like Publishers Clearinghouse, like we'll cut you a check for $5 million, but first you got to put it on a deposit of $5,000. So that's not going to be true. If someone's asking you for money to get money in return, it's probably a scam. So don't fall for that. But then something that we see quite often, which usually targets elderly people, is there'll be someone, typically it's not from around here, from a different country, but they will call and say, hey, your grandson, and then they'll say their name, or granddaughter is in jail, and you need to pay their bond, which is the XYZ amount of cash for them to get out. And unfortunately, they believe it and somehow make that deposit to them, whether it's wiring through like TransUnion, or a lot of times you'll see like Apple gift cards or eBay gift cards, stuff that's not easily trackable.
Right, and that's one of the big things to be on the lookout for, is if they're requesting payment through gift cards.
Absolutely. And when you're bonding someone out of jail, they're never going to say wire us money or give us gift cards. It's come down to the jail and pay for it. So if this ever happens, or you get a call that seems a little suspicious, it's always a good idea to call that county's jail. So if they don't give you a county, that's probably a red flag right there. So keep in mind that, but you could also go down to your local jail if you think they're at that jail, and they could tell you. So that's another thing that people always fall for, and unfortunately sometimes the scammers can really take a toll on the person's finances. So it's really sad to see, and unfortunately we see it quite often. And then another thing that we see is people meeting each other on the internet and becoming a little more intimate, and ultimately unfortunately they send photographs of stuff that they probably shouldn't be sending to strangers, and in turn they get blackmailed. So we call this sextortion. So they get blackmailed and say, they pull up like someone's Facebook page and say, these are your family members. If you don't send me $5,000, I'm going to send this to your family members or post it online. And sometimes that actually happens. So just keep in mind who you're speaking to. You never know. Someone could be using stock photographs from off Google or off the internet. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Be careful who you're talking to, because you could easily get scammed.
Awesome. Appreciate the PSA this morning, Officer Clapper, as well as going into details about search warrants. Thanks for the time.
You bet.
This is KFIZ Fond du Lac.